we're going to talk about the idea and necessity of servanthood and the importance of this in recovery. First of all, what does this even mean? The word servanthood, it kind of brings to mind the images of Downton Abbey, a splitting class, and the idea of the haves and the have-nots in a society setting. Or maybe the pitiful image of Dobby the house elf from Harry Potter, an estate of servitude, that idea of being completely subject to someone more powerful than you. So with this in mind, these particular images of servant or servitude don't sound particularly appealing. To be completely under the power of something that seeks to control you. And with that in mind, that brings up the area of addiction and how it has become a force of control that seeks to strip us from our dignity, our personhood, and the ability to look at anything beyond ourself and our, or rather its, needs. Case in point, people frequently tell me that their families are the most important thing to them. But addiction doesn't care about that. And I know of many people who arrive here and they recognize that they have compromised their relationships with their families. And they feel extremely badly for that. If they had a choice, they would always put their families first. But the addiction that takes away that ability to make that choice ends up putting itself first. And hear what I said, it doesn't put you first, it puts itself first. As it begins the process of seeking to separate you from yourself, your loved ones, and any source of hope that you have. That is a form of control that comes from something that does not care about you. And ultimately, when that which controls us doesn't care about us, then we risk stopping caring about ourselves, which can take us to that point of loss of hope. We feel we cannot be reached, and so continue to submit to that which seeks to control us, and forget that we have a choice to step into a freedom of the unknown, but a freedom nonetheless. This is not servanthood. That is addiction, and addiction is servitude. This also brings up a dichotomy between the meanings behind the words with the same root. Servanthood, at its most positive, is a word rooted in humility, choice, and the ability to offer help. At its most negative, it's a word rooted in humiliation, control, and selfishness. When we look at the disease of addiction and how it seeks to control us, it comes with many characteristics that can take us away from a place of loving kindness to ourselves and to others. And as the big book says, it takes us to a place of selfishness and self-centeredness. Page 62 of the big book reads, selfishness, self-centeredness, that, we think, is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. So if selfishness in some form or another breeds more selfishness, it means it's possible, therefore, for humility to breed humility, hope to breed hope, and service to breed service. When we look at the history of AA, the idea of service was given significant importance because a number of things were recognized. When one person helps another, it reminds that first person of why they are doing this. It also helps both people to recognize that the story is not unique, that because another person has experienced this, neither person is alone in their experiences. Now, this can be helpful as shame is something that keeps a person stuck in that feeling of isolation. As we come together with our stories, we begin to shine a light that reminds us that together we are stronger than on our own. And so, from the historical roots of AA, we see service demonstrated in the sponsor who takes on their first sponsee, to the person whose service is making the coffee at the meetings, or setting out the chairs, or in this day and age, chairing the Zoom meeting. It reminds the person that they're not alone in this process. The relationship comes with building trust, reaching out, and it teaches us to have compassion for each other. And if we can have compassion for another alcoholic or addict who has gone through this, then ultimately it reminds us to be kind to ourselves. It also reminds the person to step away from the ego. Your service is important, but it's a gift given, and not as some people might think all about them. As a person works their way through the early days of AA or NA and begins their step work, part of what's learned through step 4 is the ability to look at oneself both compassionately and objectively. First of all, step 4 is started when a person is beginning to build up trust in something outside of themselves. When it comes to addiction, our behaviors can become skewed enough that we believe we can only start trusting ourselves, mostly because we have let other people down, or we have started lying or hiding the truth or behaviors from others, which leads us to losing the ability to trust anything outside of us, or rather, outside of our addiction. As we begin what can be a vulnerable process of self-awareness, that is, looking objectively at ourselves, our actions, and our thoughts, we begin the process of moving into a deeper level of understanding and the ability of having choice, the choice to make a change. Now, spiritual awakening is defined as the psychic change needed to do the opposite of what we did while we were in active addiction. That is, making a conscious choice to do the opposite of those old behaviors. So if those old behaviors included selfishness and self-centeredness, then it stands to reason that the new behaviors would include kindness, compassion, and service to others. Going back to step 4 for a moment. Some people do have a hesitation when thinking about this step. Some people have shared that they feel shame while they have been doing this. Now, the purpose of step 4 is not to create shame and guilt, but rather to help you see certain behaviors or feelings as a pattern, and to learn the ability to objectively problem solve these areas. To begin the process of making the conscious choice to move beyond the pain, resentments, or other areas that have kept you stuck and that come up in step 4. Now, some people have said you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And ultimately, when we do know what we didn't previously know, we have the ability to do something about it. And to continue the dialogue of trust as we risk trusting another person with some of our most vulnerable experiences, shames, or resentments, we're met with a compassionate, non-judgmental person who once more reminds us that we're not alone in our experiences. Now, this is step 5 in a nutshell. And as we begin seeing this new possible behavior and the ability to help others, which in turn can help ourselves, we must recognize that there will be some people who refuse our help. If we're honest, how many of you all recognize that when people tried to help you early on, you, or rather your addiction, shut them down? You may have given them a hard time, to say the least. But you didn't need the help you thought. You weren't ready. The paradoxical commandments written by Kent and Keith, which is often attributed to Mother Teresa, gives us an example of how to live our lives in a self-differentiated model of servanthood. That is, to recognize that we will live by the disciplines and values that are important to us, not our addiction, but to us. And others may believe there are ulterior motives, but we will seek to become the best, the most authentic person that we can become with the level of awareness about ourselves and our values. This basically means we're not looking for some kind of payoff or quid pro quo for our service to others. If we're thanked, we will accept it with graciousness, but we will not rely on the need for thanks. Because if we do, then when that thanks doesn't come, or even worse, when our help is rejected, it could risk being a crushing blow that undoes the work we have been doing on ourselves. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do it anyway. People really need help, but may attack you if you do help them. Help people anyway. When we remember what it was like to be in that person's shoes, we will be able to feel compassion rather than frustration. And with some humility, we will remember how far we have come. And that when this person is ready, they can reach back out. And you will still be there, ready to help. Which also goes to show that some of the people who sought to help us recognize our struggles. And even if we have not accepted their help in the past, they just might be that non-judgmental person we can turn to when the time is right. So, what is servanthood? It's a much more complex behavior than simply helping, though it starts with help. It's an attitude. You've heard that, rather cliched phrase of attitude of gratitude. But the desire to give back can come from a place of gratitude, that we are on a path of living into our best lives. And that we want that to be available to everyone who wants that. Servanthood comes from a desire to be the best person that we can be. Even if for today is to seek to be better than we were yesterday. Servanthood, it comes from a place of self-awareness and to some degree a place of enlightenment as we seek to make conscious choices, to do the opposite of what we did in the past, to do the opposite of dishonesty or seeking reward. So this is an invitation. Are you ready to seek to live into your best life? Are you willing to work on making that conscious shift to becoming someone who chooses to be released from servitude, of addiction, or any other behaviors or experiences that have kept you prisoner, and moving into doing the opposite of the things that have kept you stuck? I hope that you are ready to start the process of giving back with humility and dignity as you learn to live into what service looks like and feels like for you. And always remember the shoes that you stand in, because someone will be standing in those shoes tomorrow and may need you to be that person, not to judge them, just as some have not judged you. People are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. Everyone needs help, but not everyone is ready for that help. Offer help anyway. And one day that person may just reach out back to you with hopes that you will be there to be that non-judgmental presence for them.